All good things must come to an end. Every empire will fall. Just like the British Empire, eventually another superpower takes hold and attains hegemony. That doesn't necessarily mean that the currency will disappear overnight and everything will change in an instant. It all depends on the events that lead up to that moment. Will there be another Bretton Woods, or will it be a slow and steady weaning off? Perhaps it could be a combination of both. Ultimately, those in control of the system, the puppet masters, decide what will happen every step of the way. We're simply along for the ride. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. This is a really interesting video. I'm getting to some information I haven't talked about in a little while. Of course, all of this is interconnected because we see it at all levels. We watch as the currencies fluctuate in the FX markets. Largely, it's irrelevant, okay? It depends on what you buy as an individual. Does it really matter what your currency is versus that currency versus that currency? You as a person, all you care about is when you go to pay your bills, when you go to the store, what do things cost? If something was being imported from a country and all of a sudden the currency exchange was way off and that spiked the price, then you're going to feel it. Otherwise, you may not even know what's going on if you weren't paying attention. Now we look at something else here because the US dollar has really had dominance. It's had a monopoly for many years, and there are many reasons for that. However, in recent time, we have seen as they have pushed as far as they can go, trying to use the US dollar against many countries, including Russia. We've also seen what they have talked about with China, saying you're a currency manipulator. And then they backed off that a bit, and now everyone seems to have forgotten about it. But as you know, every single central bank manipulates the value of their currency versus the other. This takes place literally on a daily basis. Anyone who isn't aware of that simply ignores it or doesn't know. They're ignorant to the fact. But it's okay. When you look at all of this, you will see what's really going on. Today we're going to talk about Putin. We're going to talk about what's happening with the US dollar. I'm going to show you who's currently buying up the treasuries of the US. Then we're going to look at some other factors here related to China. So let's get into this right away. You can see it in this Twitter post here, which I'll read to you very quickly. It's a summary. It's not actually a quote, but if you look down in the video, and I suggest watching it, it's just really short. It's 38 seconds. You can see the translation of Putin himself in this particular conference that they were having. And I just wanted to highlight the one very important point here. It might be hard to see because the little timer is going across here, but he says, to quote him specifically, they'll collapse soon. And in this here, he's talking about the US and specifically the US dollar. So let's read this. Vladimir Putin. The dollar enjoyed great trust around the world, but for some reason, it is being used as a political weapon, imposing restrictions. Many countries are now turning away from the dollar as a reserve currency. US dollar will collapse soon. So I suggest, rather than reading this quotation here from this particular post, actually watch the video because that's more of a summary. But he wasn't mincing words. He was saying it as straight as it gets. You know, you look at a lot of these individuals out there, and many times they beat around the bush. Many times they say things that are completely ignorant. But in this case here, he's actually correct. So in any case, I like to give credit where credit's due, and what he mentions in here is definitely accurate. The question is, what will cause the US to see their currency actually diminish on a global scale? Right now, it's got dominance. There's no doubt about it. Most trade worldwide is in US dollars. However, they've been pushing pretty hard in a lot of countries, and sometimes that country doesn't have any other choice. This isn't good for them, and they're trying to get around that. They're doing other things, going to other countries, trying to extend their hand, and many of them have been banding together. They've been joining up and saying, do we really need the US dollar? Back in the 1950s, maybe that made a lot of sense, but today might not exactly be the case. Their dollar is so strong compared to so many of these others, and that exchange rate is killing them. It's absolutely killing them. So let's look further into this here. Big changes are happening definitely with a lot of the central banks as well, though. You could see the global gold reserves have truly increased, and this just shows you what they think about the US dollar as well, because the global treasury reserves have declined. In this chart here, basically it started declining at the beginning of 2019, give or take, and we've also seen this happening back in 2016 into 2015-16 actually, when you can see that this had the same pattern, all right? So if you were to match this up, what exactly occurred back in that 2015-2016 timeframe that occurred also around 2018 into 2019, and it is very clear to me that the world was suffering around this time, and then we had an incredible burst of flow, a torrent of central bank quantitative easing, stimulus measures on all kinds, central bank quantitative easing, and every measure possible coming out of the government in order to stimulate, and they were able to actually push this off further. Now, what was happening with corporations because of their debt load and so on, that actually got a lot worse. The nation's debt got a lot worse, the deficits got a lot worse, and of course blowing this bubble bigger and bigger. Today, we are met with the crisis that no central banker is able to fix. This will be an interesting time, there is no doubt. This is the major foreign holders of Treasury securities. Every month we get the latest data, and we are looking at August 2019. Of course, as always, October 16th being the most recent date that they posted. Shortly we'll get the new information on that, but I just want to show you this for now. You could see right here that Japan owns the most out of any of the foreign holders, China just behind that, and then in a very distant third is the UK. So if you're interested, you can look through the list, but essentially just wanted to show you what has happened here. Many countries have been buying US debt, and there are different reasons why they want to do this. But over the years, we have watched as China has lessened their dependence on the US dollar. Still heavily reliant, there's no doubt about it, but if we look at the chart, essentially, it has been declining over a long period of time. Now, they still have $1.1 trillion worth, so it's not going to disappear overnight, but clearly they have made it known that they want to do away with the US dollar long term. That's very clear, that's evident. Russia has made that even more evident. They are no longer on the major foreign holders of Treasury securities, and instead they've done something else. Russia's gold reserves have surged, and so has their value. Here you can see it surging past $100 billion. They have clearly chosen gold over the US dollar. It's not as if they need that cash right now today and they need to spend it into their economy or do whatever they need to. In that case, they're buying gold. Now, sometimes this happens out of necessity because of restrictions and sanctions and all kinds of things that one country might place, in this case here the US. But as time goes on, you see central banks and governments, they decide where do they want to put their money, and oftentimes for political purposes, for other purposes as well, maybe just what they feel is right, they start to put their money into different avenues and potentially have different goals altogether. Russia's long-running bet on gold is looking better every month. The country quadrupled gold reserves in the past decade as it diversified away from US assets, a move that has paid off recently as haven demand sent prices to a 6-year high. They also mentioned the fact that China has also been buying here. Russia is one that has been making big moves out of the US dollar into gold. They do also reference the fact that US and Russian relations aren't so good right now, so this is all part of that. There's more detail if you want to check it out in this Bloomberg article. The link will be in the description as always. A growing club of very powerful countries is steering away from using the dollar. Now, of course, we have heard this all before, so many times over the years. The US dollar is going down, the US dollar this and that. There's always a claim that next year that the dollar is going to collapse, it's going to disappear and so on. I'm not part of that, and quite frankly, my opinion is completely insignificant, but we do see that the world is weaning off of the US dollar. No longer is it the only currency used. Different systems have been set up, different institutions have been set up in order to circumvent what the US has in place. Now, they're not going to have this happen overnight. There's no doubt about that. However, it has been known, supranational entities, economists, countries, they've all suggested we need to get rid of the US dollar from being number one. Doesn't necessarily mean that they want to do away with it entirely, but they don't want to have to rely on it, and that's completely understandable. If you're Russia and China and you want to do business together, why would you want to use the US dollar in between the two? In fact, why would you want to use a US payment system in between the two? Doesn't really make any sense these days. So that's why they're doing what they're doing. The US dollar has been the world's major reserve currency for decades, but that status could come under threat as very powerful countries seek to undermine its importance. Apparently, China, Russia, and the European Union are some major movers behind this push. And the truth about it is in that third point. One of the reasons driving their shift away from the dollar is the prospect of being subject to US jurisdiction if they transact in dollars. So you gotta play by the US rules if you're using US dollars. But like I said, if you're China and Russia, you wanna do what you want is best. If you're China and Russia, you wanna do what's best for your countries. You don't wanna have to give a damn about what the US thinks. Russia to cut share of US dollar in national wealth fund mulls other currencies, and of course they're looking for the Chinese currency as one of those potential options. So there are many things here, many levels, and it is very clear to me that Russia and China are definitely spearheading this movement away from the US dollar. Slowly and steadily they're going in this direction. This is one example of so many that I've seen over the years. Replace dollar with super currency. The World Bank's former chief economist wants to replace the US dollar with a single global super currency, saying it will create a more stable global financial system. The dominance of the greenback is the root cause of global financial and economic crises. The solution to this is to replace the national currency with a global currency. Now, as bad as the current system is, a global currency, in my opinion, which of course is completely insignificant, is even worse. More people being controlled by fewer and fewer hands. That's never a good thing. You want competition. You want the ability to transact in any currency on any day at any time, go in any place, and yet they want to place more and more restrictions and make it more difficult. That's only going to cause a worse problem at some point in the future. This link here, I'm just trying to show you that China has tried to do away with all of these American institutions, supranational entities like the IMF, like the World Bank, in this case here, the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, started off small, really has grown. It's only in its infancy at this point, it's a couple years old, but they have signed on many different countries, including Canada, including the United Kingdom, and so many more from Europe and all over the world. In fact, you can go to their website, aiib.org, to see what they're all about if you're unaware of it. But essentially, they don't like getting pushed around by the US, by the dominating forces. They don't want to play by their rules. So we'll see what happens. That's all for this video. If you found it informative, smash the like button. Thank you. If you want to build a business online, then check out the AmazonGPS.com. And if you want to learn about the financial education that was robbed from you throughout your period in time that you spent in school, these two simple, easy to read, yet jam-packed books have everything that you need. Check them out at the link in the description. If you want the audiobook, that's available at themoneygps.com. This is an extremely important video. I broke down so much in it and I want you to watch it. Click on it and I'll see you there.